Joining us now, Andrew Veihorn. He is the communications director of the Delmarva Electric Co-op. Always good to have him. Good friend of mine, an FOJ friend of John. He'll be with us tomorrow, where the boys are back in town at Dave Marston's office in the state capitol, going over exactly what is happening. Andrew, lots going on there, right?
Morning, John. There is a lot going on. How are you?
Good. Where do we start? Let's start with Dominion Energy and this grid deal. Some people happy, some people not. Give us a skinny.
Yeah, by now, most people are happy. It passed out of the, Senate Kilgore's bill from the House, passed out of the Senate Commerce and Labor. It was conformed to the bill that had passed out of the House, so now both bills are identical, so there's no need for a conference committee. I think there was a lot of concern that if the two houses passed different bills, that the conference committee would never be able to iron out their differences. But both sides seemed to be in agreement. There was a funny thing that happened at the end of the bill. Appalachian Voices is this group out of Southwest Virginia that advocates for saving the mountains and sunshine and solar panels and coal mines and all that kind of stuff. And they, along with the Attorney General's office, had been the kind of last man standing in opposing the bill. And, everybody else is on board. The Southern Environmental Law Center, the Virginia Poverty Law Center, the League of Conservation Voters, everyone else is on board with this bill. But Appalachian Voices is kind of hanging out there. So the bill steamrolls out of committee, like Frank Wagner said it would. They've all kind of nicknamed this bill the battleship because there's no stopping it. And then Appalachian Voices had a separate bill that would move forward third-party PPAs that would allow nonprofits to take advantage of the federal solar tax credit. And Wagner, the guy got up to speak to the bill, and Wagner said, "Excuse me, son, didn't you just speak against this other bill that would have done much more for solar than the bill that you're promoting now?" And he said, "Yes, sir, but that's just kind of how politics works." And Wagner said, "Well, you've got 10 months to figure out how politics works. We're going to PBI this bill for the next year."
So that was the end of that, right?
But, yeah, I think the Dominion bill, by all accounts, has gotten rid of the double dip. It still has the investment in the grid. It still has the Trump tax cuts coming back to the ratepayers to the tune of about $125 million a year. There's also going to be the refund of the over-earnings. So most of what people didn't like about the bill got fixed, and there seems to be general unity around it now.
Where's the opposition?
The opposition is from the Attorney General's office, who still feel like there is not sufficient oversight from the State Corporation Commission.
What about the Chap Peterson faction?
There's always going to be, you saw this in the campaigns, there's going to be an anti-Dominion faction in the General Assembly. There can't be after the wave election that happened. But most objective people will tell you when you can get Sam Rasool to withdraw his amendment, you can get the Democratic leader to vote for the bill, that you've done something right.
Do you think it's a good bill? Do you think
back 2 or 3 weeks ago
deal?
when the bills were first being discussed in their House of Origin, Rosalind Dance, a Democrat from Petersburg, asked a very telling question to a young woman from the Environmental Poverty Law Center. She said, "Is there more good in the bill than there is bad?" And that's kind of where we are. They've minimized the bad and expanded the good in the bill to where most people, by and large, are going to benefit from this.
So you think this was the best compromise for Virginia power consumers?
Yeah, you're going to get an upfront rebate July 1 because coupled with Delegate Mark Keam's bill that will allow them to immediately refund the Trump tax cuts to the ratepayers. Without that, they would have had to wait until 2020, 2021 to when they went into before the commission for a rate review before they could have refunded that money. So you've got that. You've got some of the over-earnings coming back. You're going to see more reliable power from Dominion because they're going to be investing in hardening the grid and undergrounding and some automated metering technologies. By and large, it's a good thing for Virginia consumers as a whole.
All right, so you think overall it's a good thing. I'm with you on that, and I appreciate your analysis. We're with Andrew Veihorn. He is the communications director and senior executive at Delmarva Electric Co-op, very dialed into energy and what is going on in the State House in Virginia. We appreciate his updates, as always. So you mentioned House of Delegates member Democrat Mark Keam from Northern Virginia. Now, if you don't know Mark Keam, he's been in our show a lot over the years, and Mark is a pro-business Democrat, right? Wouldn't you classify him that way, Andrew?
Yes, I think that's
pro-business.
a fair
Not a liberal. I mean, he's a Dem, but he's not anti-business. He's not a socialist by any means. So there is a can't even say this with a straight face. There's a member of the Democratic House Caucus, Andrew, who is a member of the Democratic Socialist Workers Party. He beat Jackson Miller.
Lee Carter.
He beat Jackson Miller in what was that? Manassas.
Prince William County, Manassas.
Prince William County.
General area.
He's a socialist, and he was speaking yesterday about something. I don't even know what it was. And so
he was speaking on the bill that would do away with corporate taxes and individual income taxes in the 10 poorest localities in Virginia, Will Moorfield's bill. And I think Bill Stanley has something similar.
So Art Keim is behind Lee Carter, and he puts up on his iPad, as he's speaking, he puts up an emblem of the old USSR hammer and a sickle. And everybody tweets it out. Now, that was funny. You have to admit, that was funny.
That was great, and it got a lot of immediate blowback from folks on the left who said that Mark Keam doesn't understand the difference between communism and socialism and democratic socialism. And
come
it's that age-old adage.
They have no sense of humor, man. You gotta. That's why I love Saslaw and Harston. You gotta have a sense of humor. These people have no sense of humor. They're humorless.
They're saying they don't understand Lee Carter. Well, these folks don't understand Mark Keam. If you have a chance to talk to Mark and know his life story. His family fled from the communists in Korea, fled to Vietnam, and then had to flee the communists in Vietnam to come to the United States.
Right.
So if there's anybody who understands communism, it's Mark Keam.
It's Mark Keam, no doubt about it. All right, a couple more minutes. We have a budget canyon. The House budget passing the other day with Medicaid expansion, and the Senate budget, they're not reconcilable, all right? They're Grand Canyon apart. What happens?
Who knows? There's a lot of there's a lot of horse trading to happen, and you ought to be happy. It looks like the ponies are coming back to Colonial Downs, but we can talk about that another day. But they're about. I think the House budget uses $2.9 billion in federal dollars and $307 million in a hospital tax to fund a whole host of new programs and expand Medicaid. The Senate doesn't have that in it. The Senate actually cuts the budget, and it's a fascinating breakdown. I was at an event for Ben Klein out in Roanoke this weekend, and Chris Head was the keynote speaker, and he said, who would have thought that in 12 short months that you would be relying on the conservative Senate to protect you from the liberals in the House of Delegates? And think about that for a second. And what's interesting about this budget vote as well is that it clearly violates the old Hastert rule that is so prevalent in Washington. You had 30 Republicans, more than a majority of the House Republican caucus, vote against the budget because it had Medicaid expansion in it.
So what happens?
They've got to talk. There's a lot to be traded. There's a lot of programs out there that may get the Senate on board. There's been a lot of talk about broadband funding. I don't know if that's something that could work its way in, but they are very, very far apart, and I don't know how they rectify this. This isn't something that...
Give us the timeline. When does the reconciliation happen? Just walk us through the timeline.
They're supposed to adjourn sine die next Friday, so March 10th, and I think they are meeting behind closed doors now, and they will continue to meet, and I think as you see bills make their way through the process, you're going to see people use some of these pieces of legislation that have nothing to do with the budget to try to gain some favor or to pay retribution back to the people in the other chamber. Jennifer Boysko, a delegate from Northern Virginia, had an animal cruelty bill in the Senate yesterday that passed the House almost unanimously, and as payback for the budget and for some other bills that have been killed, they completely transformed her bill into one of Bill Stanley's bills that had been killed in the House. And Frank Wagner said, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and take this bill back to your folks in the House, explain to them how physics works. So, there's a lot of jockeying going on between the two chambers right now, and a lot of it's politicking, and maybe they know how they're going to end up, but I don't think anyone else sees how this comes together right now.
Chances of Medicaid expansion on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think 8. I mean, it's going to happen.
Right.
And I get back to what we said, a month or two ago. They're going to give this to Ralph Northam just despite Terry McAuliffe because it was his key issue, and they never gave it to him.
Right.
But to be able to give it to Northam his first time out, I think would be a big needle in the eye of somebody running for president.
Spot on. I've got a minute. Colonial Downs update.
It's made its way back. It looks like not only horse racing, but perhaps slots are coming to Colonial Downs. When you've got Dick Black on board with bringing gambling back to Virginia, and folks are saying, this is going to be my one exception. I think that place, New Kent County, there was so much investment that went into that, and it has just seen the lifeblood of that community been sucked out since that track went away, and there's nothing else to take its place.
Who would the owners be? Right?
They're missing an opportunity on tourism, and
it's
a
not
lot
the
of revenue
Jacobs
as well.
though. The Jacobs wouldn't be running the racetrack, so they'd have to find new owners.
Right, but that'll come. I mean, you've got a beautiful facility and a willing
Well,
market.
if they get slots in there, even if it's race slots, which is a little bit different, if they get something in there to generate additional revenue, then they can make it profitable. Then we can get the Virginia Thoroughbreds back there. Andrew Veihorn, I'm out of time. Thanks for being with us.